about the 5 methods of valuation. I know some people have voiced their concern to me that they're overwhelmed with the level of detail. I can assure you that's just scratching the surface. But I hope the takeaway message here is understand that there are 5 methods. Understand that these are what they're called, and that's what they expect from them. When we did there's a 7-tier valuation framework that was tier 7, the 7-tier valuation framework, I apologize, where that ties in the methods that we've spoken about in the approaches to the entire framework. So I intentionally wanted to teach the methods first, so that when I introduce the framework and I say, here's the premise, here's the purpose, here's that, and here's the method that you should be using, then you would have an idea of what a method looks like, as opposed to just not having an idea what I'm talking about. So I hope that tied in pretty well. If you guys think it should have been the other way around, I should have spoken about the 7-tier valuation framework versus the 5, and then the 5 methods. Please feel free to tell me that opinion as well in the feedback. And now we're going to talk about, okay, now that you understood the motivation and the importance of the standard and the kind of methods that are being used and sort of how it fits in the framework and what to expect, and we ran some examples of valuing hotels, residentials, etc. Now, how does it actually? Now let's get to the pragmatic aspect of the training, which is the next 2 modules. The first one, the module number 4, is what is the valuation process? Again, I divide into 7 steps. I like the number. And module number 5, I'm going to be talking about the classification, RERA's valuer classification progression model. How to, in my opinion, we'll have an open discussion on how to select the appropriate valuer and what to expect in a compliant report. We'll look at some example reports and best practices in reviewing those valuation reports. So I think this is more of a pragmatic, given now the background that we had, what we're going to do with that background. So a typical valuation process, is that everyone okay? I'll jump in. So as usual, the module objectives is to understand the minimum requirements for an engagement letter and to know what the next steps, what steps to follow in conducting a valuation exercise, and hopefully you appreciate the importance of following the professional standards in doing so. So again, a quick recap, just to make sure that everyone's awake and back. Question number 1. I think, did someone close the polls? I don't think they're working. Oh, here they are. Start a poll. Okay, so question number 1. I think there's a bug here in the clicking. Summary is only giving me. Oh, here you go. All right. So, which of the following methods is typically the most appropriate to use to value an income-producing property? What do you guys think? Okay, so I'm getting some answers back. Still see some people answering. Let's publish those results. All right, so majority of the people said B, the investment method, which I think would be the right method. Some people said residential method. That's not right. And then some people said the profits method. I think the profits method is a valid method if it's a income-producing business, right? You value it as like if it's a mall or a hotel. So it could be a right answer, but I think it's a partially right answer. I think the more appropriate one is investment method. Next question. We have capital value of a commercial property is it rent value multiplied by floor height? Is it rent value over yield? Is it rent value plus hope value? Is it rent value over number of years? All right, so I think the majority of people got this one, right? So it's definitely the rent value divided by the yield. And this is the basis of the traditional investment method. Very good. All right, let's talk quickly about the typical valuation process. So we train the valuers to follow the specific steps. Some valuers follow those steps to the T. Some of them skip a few. Some of them add a few. But I would expect that the first step would be taking instructions and agreeing on terms, right? The second step would be something called the desktop review, where you would read the facts, to collect the data, etc. The third step would be to do a site inspection. The fourth step would be to search for comparable evidence or market data and evidence in general. Step number 5 would be to reflect, thought, analyze, and do the valuation. 6 would be completing the report to the client, and 7 would be maintaining records. I think the RERA, the BVS law, actually dictates, the standards dictate all of those 7 steps, including the BVS. You have to, in a typical valuation exercise, you would have to do the 7 steps unless there's a departure. Like, for example, in COVID-19, you're not unable to do a site inspection, then you have to state that and then make your assumptions accordingly. Sometimes there's no search for comparable evidence. Very rare if you're doing, I can't think of any method where you wouldn't be using some market data or comparable evidence of some kind. And you have to absolutely maintain records by law. I think you have to, according to the RERA and the BVS, you have to keep all your valuations, all your sources of data, all your substantiation for, I think, 5 years. I'm not sure if it's 3 or 5 years. I think it's 5 years. Yeah. For audit reasons and liability.
I think it's 5 years. I believe it's 5 years.
So again, taking instructions. Taking instructions, agreeing on terms must cover. This is for you guys. So I know you guys are bankers. Some of you are working for investment companies. You have to agree on those terms according to the law with the valuer before accepting the instruction. It could be, I mean, I know every vendor, every bank, and every investment firm has a different way of procuring the valuer. Some people use engagement letters. Some people use contracts, annual contracts for any number of valuations. Some people use purchase orders or work orders. Some people use what other forms of engagement can they be? I think there's 4 or 5 different modes. But in any of those, you have to, some I should say a signed offer. Sometimes there's some people accept a signed offer. But any of those formats, engagement agreements, there has to be an identification and the status of the valuer. The valuer has to state his name or her name, her RERA registration number, what classification they're at, are they A, B, C, or D, and what's their title. You have to identify the client, identify any other intended users. So who other users beside the client? Is it a bank, a third party, etc.? You have to obviously put an identification of the asset itself or liability being valued. This is a mall, this is a residential property, address X with area Y. There's the financial currency, the valuation currency. Is it going to be valued in dinars? Is it going to be valued in dollars? The purpose of the valuation has to be stated and agreed upon. The basis of value adopted has to be agreed upon. The valuation date has to be agreed upon. and the nature of the extent of the valuer's work, including investigation. For example, there will be a site inspection. There's going to be a period of time where we're going to be collecting data, comparable evidence. It has to be agreed upon in the scope of work, for instance. And essentially, there are the minimum terms of engagement, I think unfortunately, I should have put a number in here, but I think there are 16. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I was going to say 15 or 16.
18. So I should have put a number in here. Could have made my life easier. So 18 different things that have to be present in the terms of engagement, whatever the format of the terms of engagement is, right? So someone will ask me, okay, what if it's an annual contract? I'm a bank and I have a short list of valuers and I sign an annual contract with them with a fixed fee schedule. How would I identify every single asset ahead of time? And the answer would be, it would be a split engagement, right? You would have an annual contract that sort of has the identification of the status of the valuer, identification of the client, but it wouldn't have any other intended user. It wouldn't have the identification of the asset. It would not have the currency. It would not have the purpose of value. It would not have the basis of value. It would not have the valuation date, right? So essentially, there is a contract that you have with the vendor. Is the connection strong? A lot of people are suffering from poor connection.
I'm okay. I can hear you fine. Doesn't seem to be an issue my side.
Okay. All right. So some banks, for instance, they go with an annual renewable contract with a specific short list of vendors, valuers rather, and then every time an asset comes, they would send something called an assignment letter, right? So here's valuer A. I've signed with you in the beginning of the year, and then come 3 months down the line, I send you an assignment letter. In the assignment letter, I specify the remaining missing components of the engagement, right? So the contract with the assignment letter would be a full set of terms. So that's a way to circumvent that. So I don't know why I have a test here. Quick quiz. So let's try this out. Does anyone have any guesses to the answer to this question? So a desktop review for a residential valuation will usually comprise of which of the following? So the desktop review is the step that's before the inspection. If you remember, in the 7-step, the beginning is agreeing on terms. The second one is desktop review. The third one is inspection. All right, so I think most of the people got that one right. Yes, that's what you would expect from a valuer before they go on to the inspection, right? You would see that they're reviewing historical evidence of the property in the area, establishing price evidence from price comparison sites, just to get an idea of what they're going to be visiting, looking at the market trends to understand where that area, the market in general, is going, and then discussion with colleagues for additional knowledge. If they, they talk to colleagues, have you done this before? Talk with brokers, etc., about the area before actually doing the site inspection. I think, and why is this necessary? Because issues do arise before the inspection, right? And instead of incurring that extra cost or incurring that effort, you would first do some homework at home before you actually go and do the inspection.
Just a caveat though, bankers, please don't ask valuers to give a desktop review of a mixed-use development site or a really complex commercial asset.
Yeah, no, I mean, a desktop review is not a desktop valuation, right? So So there is a type of valuation that's called a desktop valuation, right? Desktop valuation is issuing a valuation report without actually visiting the site. And that's you'll see that a lot now with the COVID-19 and people unable to travel. And it's going to be very clear in the title of the report, this is a desktop valuation of this asset. And you have to take that with a grain of salt. But what I'm talking about here is that step is called desktop review, which is step number 2. Okay? I'm assuming here a full valuation report. You have to do an inspection after that. So it usually comprises of a review of historic data, exactly what we said. You look at the market trends, discuss with colleagues for additional knowledge. Before you can view location on the map, you can look at market trends in Property Finder, etc. After that, you'd actually do a site inspection, right? A site inspection, what are you looking at when you do a site inspection, right? You're looking at location, what kind of accommodation it is, the property type and the layout, orientation, view, condition and state of repair, services and fixes, size of property, local amenities, and so forth, right? That affects the value, right? If you go to a property and you discuss significant damage, or you look at the view and it's overlooking an ugly garbage dump or whatever, that's not going to show up on the map. That's not going to show up in the contracts, right? Or in even the drawings of that building. You can only see that when you go and take pictures. And you should expect live pictures, guys. You should expect from your valuers to have a section in the report that's called inspection. And in that inspection, there should be a description of the asset, what they saw, condition assessment, pictures that they have taken and not just passed around or taken from the internet. That is now the case. That's the law. So another quiz, just to keep things alive. Which of the following actions would a residential valuer, again, residential here, most likely carry out when finding comparable information? Should they be speaking with the neighbors to find out how much they think the property is worth? Should they be speaking with local agents to find out how much they think the property is worth? Should they be searching property portals to find asking prices? Search government registries to find recent transactions? I mean, again, looking for the most appropriate answer here. Okay. Let me know. Anyone else? All right. So I guess, again, the majority of the people got that one right. I think, again, we're looking at the most appropriate answer. So if you're speaking with the neighbors, they probably have a vested interest for their for their property to be valued higher than it actually is, right? Or if you come across a neighbor who wants to buy that property, they're very likely to give you a wrong, lower answer, right? Speaking with local agents to find how much they think the property is worth is definitely a good answer. But then, is there a better answer out there? Search property portals to find asking prices. Yeah, you can definitely look at that. And search government registries to find recent transactions. I think if there's a government registry with recent transactions, that will be the strongest. Again, in the hierarchy of evidence, will be the strongest on that list, right?